So yeah, it all started in Thailand, and I was traveling all over Thailand, working with Muay Thai guys, making no money, sleeping on floors, handling their weight cuts, their rehydration, and kind of just seeing what worked, what didn't work. I was testing it on myself as well, and
Uh-huh.
the good thing about that, I mean, when you got guys fighting for $50, they appreciate the help. That
Yeah.
I felt like even at my worst, I helped them like 1%. So it was
Yeah.
like it was huge for them. They had someone that was kind of catering to them and helping them cut weight and
Yeah.
handling that aspect of it. But it just gave me tons and tons and tons of reps,
Yeah.
and I think that was the biggest difference in shift because I took that risk, went out there, made some good connection with guys that were coming up in the UFC and like coming up in the Muay
Hmm.
Thai scene, and it kind of just snowballed from there.
Welcome to the Zero Quit Podcast, where we bring you inside the minds of elite athletes, business owners, specialists, and other creatives. I'm your host, Covington, and through these conversations, you'll hear practical advice and effective strategies for optimizing not only your performance, but also your habits and routines as well. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. What's going on, guys? Today I have the pleasure of having on Ian Larios. He is a nutrition coach and chef for top MMA fighters across the world, including UFC champ or former UFC champ, now Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier, UFC champ Jamahal, Yair Rodriguez, who just got the interim belt, and even Bellator champions, including Sergio Pettis as well. What's going on, dude?
What's good?
It's a pleasure to connect, like I said, because you're in Bali and then I'm in the States, and the connection, like, I'd never really thought about the time zone with Bali, but it being like 15 hours is kind of wild, like we talked about before we started this. And so, like, you're just waking up, I'm getting close to bedtime, but we're making it work.
15 hours in the future. Yeah, it's always hectic coming back here from the States
Well, it was
and
funny
trying to
trying to schedule
adjust.
it too, because I told you I was like, I'm like 7 a.m. Thursday for you, but it's Wednesday for me. So it's not even just a time thing. It's like I have to remember what day too. So I'm glad neither of us messed up and I don't know, showed up on the wrong day.
Yeah, that's why I was like, just give me the date and time because like I've done a few before where someone like doesn't account that I'm 15 hours ahead and then
Yeah.
we're on completely opposite days and yeah, so
Yeah. Plus, it's good to connect because, I'm not the like most hardcore of hardcore fans with MMA, but I do consider myself like a general hardcore fan, and I followed it for like 5, 6, 7 years now. Try and watch every fight. Even I'm not the generic guy who's just hopping in saying, "Oh, is this Dustin Poirier guy any good?" Or the friend that
yeah,
probably asked you like, "Oh, when is Conor McGregor fighting?" So it's nice to kind of get into like a little bit of the weeds as far as some prospects, weight cutting, all the little like details of MMA, because as you know, it's still like a pretty niche sport for the most part.
for sure, man. And I mean that's the biggest thing. I was a fan before anything. I mean, I used to go
Yeah,
to the fan expos as a kid. I'd wait in line to meet fighters, and it was one of those things where I was a fan before any of this. So it's
yeah,
cool to, be part of be part of the sport, but
yeah,
I'm still a hardcore fan. I try to watch
yeah,
all the fights. I mean, when I was growing up, I didn't miss one fight. I used to watch the fights on
yeah.
Facebook when like the prelims were on Facebook and like you just stream them through
Hmm.
like the Facebook page, and yeah, so I get to be a fan in a sport that that I love, and do what I love. So it's a cool little mix of all my passions.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's cool to sit back and be able to watch like my hard work and their hard work come together. But I'm still a huge fan, so I got to
All
pinch
right,
myself all the
and
time.
you get a good seat, as I touched on a little bit. You just got back from Perth, Australia, where they had what is it, 284, and
Yeah,
as Emmett was at the what do you call it, the little spot where they're checking him before adding in the what do you call it, the Vaseline, everything on their face, little
yeah.
waiting zone. And I like look over the shoulder and I see you, and I go, I like nudge my wife, and I was like, that's the guy I'm having on the podcast like later this week. And so that was like funny seeing you just there, just stoic, getting hype. And but yeah, those fights were pretty wild.
Yeah, I was a nervous wreck for that fight, to be honest. Just because, I mean, I get close with these guys,
Yeah,
and it's hard to not be emotionally invested. I don't look
yeah,
at it as like how it's going to benefit me. Like I'm truly just wanting them to benefit from, from their wins
yeah,
and see them progress in life. And I've been on both ends of it where guys lose and guys win, but that Perth crowd was crazy, so it didn't help at
Yeah.
all. Like it was nuts in there, and it was loud in there from the second I walked in. And
Yeah.
I mean, because I was cooking for Yair throughout the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to check in at I think 9 a.m. So like he
Mm-hmm.
really only got like a meal before he had to go. And I mean, some of those guys were fighting at 7, so they had to go check in at
Yeah.
5 a.m., which
That's
is
right.
crazy.
Because that card, because they were still doing it, North American pay-per-view time. Yeah, it still ended up being like 9 a.m. for a lot of fighters.
Those guys are
It's
having
like,
fist fights for breakfast. Like
yeah.
those guys have to go, and I mean obviously some guys acclimated and got there early.
Yeah.
But I mean if you're on the prelims, some of these guys aren't like in the financial position to get out to Australia, a week
Yeah.
early.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly. That's a really good
they're
point.
having to acclimate pretty quickly, and I mean they had to weigh in at 7 a.m. So I mean they had
Mm-hmm.
less than 24 hours to rehydrate and then go out there and fight in front of this crazy bloodthirsty Australian crowd that were just chanting all sorts of crazy
I'd
stuff.
say the
And it
only
was
crowd that I
loud.
think would compare would be that London crowd back on that March card, or just London in general.
Yeah,
Those
London
crowds
in
are
general.
always absolutely nuts.
I haven't been to London yet. I've been to London, but I haven't been there for a UFC card recently. I think the last one I went to was a couple years back, but I didn't go to the fights.
Do you have anyone
I
fighting on
used
the upcoming? Was it 286?
No, I don't. I actually kind of just
Okay.
like I'm taking a couple weeks off after
You deserve it.
these last few just to kind of
Yeah.
unwind and be able to have a little reset and be back home and hang out with my dog and chill a bit because they're banging fight cards out left and right. Vegas.
They
I
are.
think there's one in
Yeah.
Vegas this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I like to
let's
kind
dig
of
into a
sit
little bit
back.
about you and your history and explain how you got into all this. So I guess walk us through a little bit of your origin story, a little bit of your background, how you got into food, how you got into cooking, MMA even. I guess give us the general scoop.
Yeah, so I grew up internationally. Like my parents were international school teachers, so
Mm-hmm.
we traveled all over the world growing up, going to different schools. We'd move probably every 2 3 years. So I was kind of just grew up in a bunch of different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of where my food journey started. We were just I always loved food. I may not look like it, but I like to eat. Um,
Oh, when you're 6'4",
and
it's hard to pack on pounds, right?
it is, and yeah. So it kind of all started in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Food is such a big piece of the culture there that I grew up just going to all
Mm-hmm.
types of different like crazy Chinese restaurants where they have live duck and fish and everything, and I was just fascinated by it. I used to go just
Mm-hmm.
sneak back into the kitchen and watch them like gut frogs, and it was just one of the things that you know I think it like opened my eyes to. I always loved food, but like just the process of like cooking food and providing food
Yeah.
was something that just made
Spark some
made me
curiosity.
spark some curiosity, and it was something that I thought I could do. It
Yeah.
didn't seem like it was something too crazy, and so I started making YouTube videos of cooking like immediately. This is before YouTube
Uh-huh.
was cool, and there's actually
Yeah.
there's still a couple videos out there. I was made fun of, so I
Dude,
deleted a lot of them.
I have the same story basically, and I actually stumbled across some of my old videos. So I probably around the same age that you were doing it, like early like 2010, 11. I was actually making like these tech YouTube review channel, or I had like a tech review channel, and so I was just reviewing literally anything I'd buy from it. It was like a pair of like Skull Candy headphones or whatever, and
Yeah,
like looking back, I was like filming it in like photo booth on my family like MacBook, and high pitched voice, and just the worst lighting, like the
it's hard to
stupidest
watch,
videos.
right? It's hard to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get like teased for it, but like in the long run, I'm sure you feel this way too. You're so glad you did some of that experience, because there's so many people that are like really uncomfortable on camera or don't feel like they're that creative. And so even though you get teased a little bit, you almost kind of get these creative juices flowing, a little bit of confidence, a little bit of independence.
Yeah, and exactly. But the thing was, it's like a different culture now. Like now it's
Yeah,
accepted. Like it's normal for kids to go and
very
do like
different.
toy reviews and
Yeah,
do their TikToks and all that stuff. Where it was a different time where it's like a shift in the culture in the sense that
that's a
like
good
back
point.
then it was like YouTube wasn't obviously YouTube was growing and there was some channels that did really well, but it wasn't like you knew someone that did a bunch of YouTube videos. But now it's
Yeah.
like I have a bunch
Now
of
they're
friends that
famous, they got careers.
yeah and they're
Jake Paul's
making
boxing
crazy
people.
money. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
making crazy money, and it's just like the thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think, I think I was in seventh grade. Um, and yeah, I was just doing, my dad would film and I'd
Hmm.
get everything prepped up and I'd do like these horrible walkthrough videos on how to cook like Malaysian curry. And like I got one video with like I think 15,000 views, and back then like
Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah.
a white kid in Malaysia cooking Malaysian curry, like all the comments were like, "Oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
And like at the time, I was like, "Oh, I'm not doing any more." And I ended up doing a couple more, and then
Yeah.
yeah, word got around in my middle school that I was doing YouTube videos, and people would like open up during class. I'm like, you know what, man, I'm not doing these anymore.
Well, we had the same shame experience at least, so you're not alone in that. So how'd you end up getting into actually advancing from a little like side hobby, doing this for fun, to okay, I'm actually trying to shift this into a career path, see what I can make from it.
So, like I said, I was a big fan of MMA. Used
Hmm.
to watch I'd watch all the weigh-ins, and I just would be fascinated with these guys weighing in. I'm like, these guys
Hmm.
have to have some form of, like, maybe they have chefs, or I didn't really know too much about it because I just saw these guys were shredded and weighing in
Cut
and
up, yeah.
cut up. I'm like, I wonder who cooks for these guys, and there was no one really doing it.
Yeah.
So that kind of sparked my interest because I was like, I wonder if that's something I could do, like if I could cook for fighters. And then as I started to dig into it, I was like, wow, these guys are cutting a lot of weight. Like, these guys have to lose a lot of weight and they have to cut a lot of
Hmm.
weight. I'm like, I wonder if there's anyone that helps them with that. And at the time, I just started training too,
Hmm.
and it was in like a bad gym. Well, not a bad gym.
MMA
It was like
overall was a specific discipline.
it was MMA gym, so it was like a
Okay.
fight gym, but it was
Yeah.
like a hardcore like OG like sparring every day type
Oh
gym,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
that's
like
where
a
I
shoot
got
the
like my
box or
licks
something. Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it was like, and it was in Reno, Nevada, and it was just like a hardcore, just like leave with a
Yeah.
bloody nose every
Wars every
day and
day.
a
Yeah.
headache. Yeah, and I was a growing kid. Like that's the last thing I needed to have was some form of head trauma.
Yeah.
But I'd see just fighters cutting weight, and a couple would be crying, like they'd just be like struggling, and
Hmm.
coach would tell them to eat an apple and go home. I'm like, that
Yeah.
doesn't sound right. So I kind of started digging into it, and there was a couple guys that were kind of in the space and successful. And a guy named Mike Dolce was kind of like the OG
Yeah.
of the kind of the weight cut space, and the nutrition space in MMA. So I kind of started following him. He was in Vegas, and he was like the guy. He was working with everybody. So as I was winding down with school, was going to school in Venice. We ended up moving to Venezuela my senior year, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to be like him. So obviously,
Hmm.
I got to go to school. Um, so I applied to school in Vegas because I just thought that's the fight capital of the world. That's where I need to be.
Hmm.
If I go to school in Vegas, I could work with fighters. You know, I can train at a gym and just try to work with as many fighters as I can.
Yeah.
So did that. You know, my goal is to work with him with Dolce. So I moved down to Vegas. I was like sleeping in my car, going to school, and I'd sleep in front of the gym that Dolce was would train out of because I just wanted to have like a chance encounter with him and be like,
Yeah.
hey man, like let me intern for you. Like I'm doing this. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
be the guy. And that never ended up panning out. He was kind of the guy that like he wanted is the Dolce diet. It's about him, right? So it was like he
Yeah.
didn't want to
Yeah.
bring on some young, hungry kid to,
Makes
to
sense.
handle that for him, which makes sense, I guess. So I had a few encounters with him, and he kind of pointed me in a couple different directions, but not the right one. Um, and
Was the school
I was
I was gonna say, was the school you were at, was it kind of like, because I assume it wasn't like a formal, like a 4-year degree type deal. Was it like a 1 or 2 year program, or what was that?
so it was a 3 year program, but it was
Okay.
more geared towards working in hospitals as a dietitian,
Yeah. Okay.
which was just the menus we were putting together were just for like pre-diabetic and like just it was
Yeah.
like the opposite of what I needed to learn. Like I was learning the
Yeah.
base of nutrition, which I already kind of knew because I was doing that throughout high school, but none
Yeah.
of it was applicable to professional athletes. It was all people that were either obese, sick,
Mm-hmm.
you know, old. Like it was all just one of those things where I
Chronic
was like, what
issues.
do
Yeah.
yeah, just I was sitting there. I'm like, how is any of this going to apply to what I want to do?
Yeah.
And then I randomly got a friend request from a chef that was the head chef at Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand,
Mm-hmm.
which was like the prime place to train in Thailand. It was like, I don't know, Roger Huerta, like Mike Swick, all these guys
Still
were
is,
out there.
right?
It is. There's a place called Bangtown now that's like the
Oh,
spot.
okay.
Like they with the Hickman brothers, they're crushing it out
Yeah.
there. And it used to be the spot. But at the time, it was like this place to train in Asia if you were trying to do
Yeah.
MMA. Like they were the first spot trying to do like have good wrestlers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the chef basically reached out to me and offered me a because I talked to him, I told him what I was doing, and he offered me an internship at Tiger
Mm-hmm.
Muay Thai to just handle the nutrition program there. So basically, put together a nutrition program for fighters, help fighters, and he'd give me room on board, a place to stay, and free training.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my
It's
pay.
a good deal.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'll book a flight out there right now.
Yeah.
And I was busting tables at this pizza place in Vegas, and school wasn't going great for me because I felt like it was pointing me in the wrong direction. Like I had no interest in working in hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
So worked a couple months, saved up some money, and flew out to Thailand and just fully immersed myself in trying to become, you know,
Yeah.
a chef and nutritionist for fighters, and was
So
sleeping in
were
the
your
dorms.
I was gonna say, were your parents uh living like close by, or where were they around this time where you were sleeping in the car, working this job, and thinking about making this kind of big transition move?
So my parents were they were in Venezuela, so they were
Okay, so
teaching
you're
at a
still
school in
teaching
Venezuela.
around. Okay.
Yeah, so they I was the youngest kid, so they were yeah they were still in Venezuela, but they didn't me and my sister were in the States now and trying to be
Gotcha.
self sufficient and
Yeah.
so yeah I had family in the States, but my parents were in the States, and it was so normal for us to get up and move, so they didn't
Yeah.
think anything of it when I went to Thailand. They're like, oh, it's just Ian's
Another move.
going
Yeah.
to do his thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I get that.
So yeah, it all started in Thailand, and I was traveling all over Thailand, working with Muay Thai guys, making no money, sleeping on floors, handling their weight cuts, their rehydration, and kind of just seeing what worked, what didn't work. I was testing it on myself as well, and
Uh huh.
the good thing about that, I mean, when you got guys fighting for $50, they appreciate the help.
Yeah.
I felt like even at my worst, I helped them like 1%, so it was
Yeah.
like it was huge for them. They had someone that was kind of catering to them and helping them cut weight and
Yeah.
handling that aspect of it. But it just gave me tons and tons and tons of reps.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest difference in shift, because I took that risk, went out there, made some good connection with guys that were coming up in the UFC and like coming up in the Muay
Hmm.
Thai scene, and it kind of just snowballed from there.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the place for prospects is Thailand in general, and definitely at that time, Tiger Muay Thai is definitely like a hotbed for a lot of up and coming athletes and stars. Excuse my ignorance, but what is it like for or in Thailand as far as like what are the marketplaces like? Like where are you getting your food? Where are you cooking it? Are you living with a bunch of guys? Is there much of a kitchen? Like what's that kind of situation look like?
So the cool thing there is it had a full scale like commercial kitchen. So pretty much I'd
Okay.
give the guys directions and they'd kind of handle it. But then like when
Yeah.
we'd go on the road, I'd just bring a hot plate, and I'd
Yeah.
be cooking
Okay.
in like hood ass hotel rooms and going to Thai
Yeah.
markets, buying chickens and like not whole chickens, but like
Yeah.
or live chickens. But be buying chicken. Well, they were
Yeah.
live when I bought them, but then they'd handle that for me. I didn't have
That's
the
good.
I didn't have the I didn't have the facilities to be gutting chickens in the hotel room sink.
Yeah,
But
I'd imagine not.
so they this great produce there, all fresh, and then obviously you got
Yeah.
like beautiful coconuts and stuff like that, where I was making their rehydration stuff with. But
Yeah.
it made it uh it made it super easy because I had a full scale kitchen, and then
Yeah.
they were able to like kind of I'd be able to run my programming through them, and
Mhm.
handle that aspect of it. I'd go in there and cook sometimes too, depending on what
Mhm.
fighter it was. But more so, I'd send them the plan, and then or the fighters would cook too. Sometimes like the fighter, I mean, there's just
Yeah.
too many guys where I couldn't do everything. So it was
Of
like
course.
send the guys directions, portion sizes, and the guys would kind of handle the rest.
So what's your approach with nutrition? I'm sure it's changed over time, and you could even touch on how it's evolved. But as far as, when you're cooking for these guys, I imagine, you're thinking, okay, protein, whole foods, good carbohydrates, and you could, dig even more into that. But, as far as, are you looking at the macronutrients specifically? You're starting to hit certain targets as you're trying to cut them down. Are you looking at just slowly reducing the calories, or are you, what's kind of your thought process of that? Because from being in like the bodybuilding space for like 7 years, like I know the general theme of cutting from a slow, methodical process, but I wonder, what your attitude and approach to it has been.
So it really depends on the athlete. Obviously, if the guys have huge weight cuts, it's an entirely different approach, and
That's true. Yeah.
counting calories and macros is super important. But really focusing, like let's say, like it's not a huge cut, and a guy just has to lose 10 pounds throughout the camp.
Mm-hmm.
You could really focus on just performance and fueling
Right.
each workout specifically is kind of the approach for that. So obviously, if guys are doing 10 rounds of wrestling and 15 rounds of sparring, obviously focusing on like a carbohydrate high and carbohydrate rich diet that day. And then obviously if they pull back and it's a day off, it's a completely different like approach. So it really depends. So
kind of like
on the
idea. Yeah, is it the idea of basically, okay, fueling that performance, food is fuel, so that they are performing optimally as much as they can, which is therefore going to allow them to burn more calories and kind of create that deficit?
Yeah, and then obviously fueling for recovery as well.
Yeah.
Because obviously you could fuel for a great workout, but if you botch the post-workout meal and everything else after that, like you're going to have a fatigued, under-fueled and, under-recovered athlete. So the biggest thing with that, just doing nutrient-rich foods as well. I make everything from scratch. All the sauces, everything I make is just from scratch. So pretty much limiting preservatives, whether that's beneficial to them or not. I just like to be able to handle everything and have everything in my hands.
Yeah.
And I just really think that like whether, seed oils cause inflammation or not, that's up for debate. But I just try to handle all aspects of it. So I'm in control of each ingredient that goes in there. And I know exactly like how much sodium, how many carbohydrates, how much protein, everything down to a T that's going in there because I'm making everything from scratch, and then just tracking the weight loss. I know, like I said, I know how many calories are going in. I know their wake up weights. I know how much water they're drinking. So in terms of where they're tracking, we can make decisions based off that for the next day. Intrafuel, stuff like that, like see how much they're losing throughout each workout, make sure that we're putting that back on and they're optimally hydrated. So just tracking it to a T, weighing them pre and post workout. That way I kind of have an idea of how much they're losing and being able to kind of, refuel them adequately.
Yeah. Is there, I know when, I was, not to cut you off, I know when I was like cutting for bodybuilding and things like that, generally, I think, I was trying to aim for like 1 to 2 pounds per week. Now, obviously, a fight camp might be a much longer. Are there certain kind of ranges? Obviously, like we mentioned, the poundage can vary greatly depending on the athlete. But are there certain like ranges that you're trying to like stay within as far as, them losing weight from week to week, or like, hey, we're losing too fast if it goes above 2 pounds a week or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on how they're performing and how they're recovering. Like, if they feel great and they're losing weight fast, let's stick to it.
Yeah, so a bit intuitive.
Yeah, but then I mean, the thing about weight cutting is like, it usually doesn't come off as fast as you'd like.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things too, where if guys wake up heavy, it changes the pace of the day, because you're the guy cooking their food. Whose fault is it? I mean, technically, is it my fault? But like, you're, and I'm living with the guy too, so it's like, I try not to tell guys, oh, you're gonna wake up at this weight today, just because there's a lot of variables, right? Like if he slams water before bed, and he's half a pound heavier.
You gotta tell DC no more snacking.
Yeah, just tape the cabinet
no
again for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's more so, I guess it's one of those things that just varies on the athlete, but I try and just track the daily progress. So like at the end of the week, we see, okay, like you lost half a pound a day. During 2 sessions, you lose a pound and a half, and it stays fairly consistent. But obviously, as you know, as you get closer, that can drastically change where you're not,
Yeah.
you're not dropping as much. That messes with you mentally. Then you feel like you're just, on the struggle bus because you're not losing weight. You feel like
Yeah.
you're underfueled, and as you cut back on calories, if you feel underfueled, like there's really no way to avoid. You're not going to add
You
more
can't.
calories into that
Yeah,
equation,
exactly.
right? So,
Yeah. Well, I think
it's
you
just
you
kind of
referenced a
doing
good.
damage control.
Yeah, you reference a number of good points because, as obviously you experience, your weight fluctuates every day for a million different reasons, right? So it's really important to look at an entire week's worth of weigh-ins. Weigh in at the same time every single day, usually is how I did it first thing in the morning. And you're also doing it, pre-post workout, which has value as well. And then looking at the, weekly averages, seeing how the progress is being made. Because, if you drink a lot of water before bed, your weight could be different. If you had a lot of sodium, you could be holding water weight. If you eat later at night, it might not, have digested as fast. So many different factors. So it's hard to, account for that, but you do as best you can. How often are fighters making the mistake of cutting carbs to try and lose
Oh
fat?
man, all the time, all the time. Guys think carbs make them fat,
Of
and
course.
there's and I mean, if you're doing 10 rounds of wrestling and you're eating avocados and chicken breasts, like you're gonna feel like
Are there any
that.
fighters that thrive on like a keto diet that you know of?
I mean, not that, I don't know about thrive, but I mean, I know there's some guys
Survive.
that try, and they're just
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
grit and just toughness.
Yeah.
So and Jamal was one of those guys. Like he just
Yeah.
if he wanted to lose 3 pounds in a week, he'd be like, "I'm doing keto this week."
Yeah.
And he'd tell me this. I'm like, "But why?" And he'd
Yeah.
be like, he'd have one meal. He'd fast all day, go train,
Kind
and
of
then
intermittent fast.
he'd Uber Eats. Yeah, I mean, but he didn't know he was intermittent fasting. Like he
Yeah,
was just starving.
accidental.
He was just starving himself and figuring that was the best way to go about it.
Uh,
He'd order Applebee's, like some like blackened salmon, and
Yeah.
he'd Uber Eats it to the house. He'd eat that, and then he'd have a Snickers bar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well at least you got some carbs, like at least it was in the form of wrapped in chocolate and caramel, but at
Yeah.
least you had some
Not
carbs.
as you mentioned, not nutrient dense quite, is what you'd say about that. Let's pick
Yeah.
on Jamal right now. So he just came off, obviously biggest win of his career, beating Glover back in January. What did you do with him, or certain kind of go-to meals, or what was your approach with him as far as making sure he was ready to perform his best? Because that performance surprised me. Like I thought he'd be better than Glover on the feet, but he really just seemed his stamina was way better than I expected over 5 rounds.
Yeah.
And he really just everything clicked. All the gears were on point that fight.
Yeah, he really showed out, and it's never easy to go to Brazil, and win a fight against a Brazilian, especially a guy like Glover who's so well rounded and just a veteran in the game, and he's also like the nicest guy in the world. Like
Yeah, dude.
you couldn't tell we were fighting him.
When
All
him and
week
Jon
he
fought,
was-
they were just, it was impossible to choose someone to win because him and Jon are like the sweetest people on like those embedded
They're
videos.
OGs, like they're
Yeah.
and especially Glover. He's cut his teeth and he's just been in the sport for so long where he's got no animosity towards his opponents. He was shaking our hand all week, making jokes, and getting to see him like do that and like handle that loss. So I mean, he's just a
Honorably,
G.
yeah.
Yeah, he's just the type of guy that those are the type of guys that should be world champions. And but yeah, back to Jamal. Everything, like you said, everything clicked that week, but it just seemed like it was gonna happen just because he got the fight on short notice, so it was a mad dash to get him to the fight. He was coming off the couch, accept that title fight, was heavy, but again, he was coming from eating a bunch of bad food and not training to just a super clean diet and two-a-days, so like his body had really no choice but to get in shape quick. And his mind, man, that dude's built different. He's been through a lot growing up.
He probably gets that call and he's like, well, oh, it's go time. Like I had 6 weeks, this is the fight of my life, all in.
And fighting doesn't scare him. Like someone offers him money to go fight in a parking lot. That dude's jumping in his car and going to and beat somebody up.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that he's so like battle tested and like his mind is just like forged in war, that he's just ready to go and it doesn't scare him. So like when we were talking about going to Brazil and fighting Glover, like he loved the idea of everyone booing at him and wanting him to lose, and like he thrives in that environment, and that's why I think he did so well. Obviously, he trained his ass off. He was in the best shape he's ever been in, just because his nutrition was on point, one, but two, he trained 2 times a day really, really hard, and he didn't give himself a choice but to be in shape. Obviously, he's always going to be a good striker. He's going to have that in his back pocket. But, Glover took him down in that 5th round and mounted him.
Yeah.
And Jamahal reversed him.
Yeah.
So in the positions
he mounted
that
him, I think, twice in that fight. Yeah. And he reversed both, I think. Yeah.
And in all the positions, like, the doubters said he was going to lose, and he shined in. And like, he wanted to get in those positions. He wanted to show that he's got a ground game and show that he's, well-versed and well-rounded. And he did all that. And he answered all the questions. And that's the biggest thing a champion can do. Answer all the questions and leave no doubt.
Yeah. He definitely, again, like surprised me with that performance. I was like a full-on doubter because, like I said, I did think he was going to kind of clean up shop on the feet. But I think it certainly showed mentally, as you said, he had that battle-tested mindset to where it didn't matter what, all the picks that people were making online. Oh, Glover's going to beat him on the ground, blah, blah, blah. He was fully convinced that he was going to dominate in every area of that fight. And even as things got, further down in the fight and Glover was not going away no matter what you hit him with, round 4 or 5, he was still, let's go. And even in the 5th round, he wasn't playing it safe. He was still trying to put him out,
Did you see that video of them pouring the water on his head?
The water on him, yeah. That's what I was visualizing.
All Glover's blood, just like that wasn't. None of that was Jamal's blood. That was all Glover. Like he had chunks of his skin in his hair.
Glover's got he's got a hell of a chin, man. A hell of a chin.
Obviously they weren't going to stop that fight after the last doctor stoppage before that with the Figueiredo doc. Like they almost burnt that place down. Yeah. So it was. I knew he was gonna have to put him out for them to stop it, but man, I was going nuts. I was like, just please stop this fight so we could get out of here.
You don't want a Leon situation either.
Fight. And it's MMA. Anything can happen, So it's like, and then when he took him down in that beginning of the 5th round, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But as soon as he reversed him, I knew that was a nail in the coffin. Jamahal on top of people, when Jamahal shows his top game, that's gonna show some people too how well-rounded he is and how special that dude is, because his top game is special too. He hurts guys. That kid's got power everywhere, and
got the death touch.
He's gonna rate. He's got the death touch. He's like what he did to Jimmy Crute. Like he broke that dude's orbital in multiple places with one shot.
Jimmy Crute got another beating recently too.
Poor Jimmy. But I mean, Jamal's a huge dude, bro. He wears a size 15 shoe.
Yeah, it's a big guy.
At 6'3", a size 15 shoe at 6'3", like that's not. He's just a big dude, and he hits hard. He's athletic, and he's gonna be a problem for a lot of guys, man. He like I said, it's cool to see him come from where he comes from, but he's also from a super small town gym, like in Grand Rapids, like he's from a small jiu-jitsu gym there. And it's all normal guys. Like the coaches are guys that work 9-to-5 jobs as well. That's their business, and it's cool to see them build a world champion. And very, very few people will ever become a world champion. But the fact is, like, he did that in a relatively quick period of time, coming off Dana White's Contender Series, and then it was just a perfect scenario. Like the other fight's a draw. Jamahal gets the call, short notice in Brazil. Like, that's what movies are. Like, I've always wanted to be part of, like, just badass moments of the sport.
Yeah.
And to go out to Brazil together as a team. Jamal's never traveled abroad, and get to experience that together is, like, that's why I do this. Because it was, like,
a hell of a
that's
story.
a memory that I'll cherish forever, because it was also special for us because all those coaches, that's their first time going to Brazil, first time having a fighter fighting for a title, doing all the media. Like it was just cool to sit back and let the week play out.
Yeah.
But it was one thing where like it just felt like there was going to be a shift. Like it felt like Jamal was going to get
coming
that done.
coming from a smaller camp too, and like you mentioned, the smaller gym, it raises everybody's expectations of like, what's possible. It really does. It's like the rising tide lifts all boats type of mindset.
Exactly, and you don't have to be from one of these big box gyms to be a world champion. And like,
Yeah.
a wrestler in Michigan has access to go train with Jamal. Like a young kid could go train at that gym and watch Jamal train every day, and like that's just in his backyard, and he could be a world champion. That's right. Like it's just, I think the biggest thing is just the fact that he could have this impact on these guys, and just he doesn't come from anything, and he's built a life where he could really have whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And he's gonna have some big fights coming up. I mean, the Yair fight's huge. The Alex
Coatan. Yeah.
Yeah, the Coatan fight's huge too. I mean, he gets his revenge. He wants to get his revenge for beating up his coach and his friend, and the storyline there is perfect. So I mean, depending on how long, he's got to get past Izzy, and I don't think he does. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many fights that could be made, and hopefully Yuri's shoulder heals up soon because I think that's just an incredible matchup. Stylistically,
I think he's supposed to be back soon.
Yeah, I just think that the timeline that they're trying to give him, I hope they give him enough time to heal up, so there's not any doubters when Jamal does, put his lights out.
I love it. So speaking of another problem in the division, or not in the division, but in the UFC, is Yair Rodriguez, dude. He's like one of the most electrifying firecracker type of fighters, bar none, in the whole UFC. So
he's a wild man. He's a wild man.
So you got connected with him. Had you worked with him in the past? And, if not, as you kind of come in on this fight week, what was your approach with basically a week to try and, keep him in tip-top shape?
So I actually had 2 weeks. So he hit me, his manager reached out to me on the flight from Brazil. So I was flying from Brazil back to the States to get a connecting flight to Bali because it was just this ridiculous, like this flight path that I had to do that made no sense, but I had to do it. And his manager, I got a Instagram message, and I thought it was fake at first because I was like, this is good. And he's like, so he offered me the spot. Well, he wanted to jump on a call first, and so I messaged him. I was like, hey, I'll call you when I land. But long story short, Yair was going to finish his camp in Bali just to acclimate. So Bali, like I said, 3.5 hour flight from here to Perth, and so he didn't want to go out to Australia too early, but wanted to come here and train. And I mean, we have all the facilities here, which they didn't know. They had no plan. They had literally they're just flying to Bali, and we're gonna
figure
win
it out.
And I'm like, man, I got you. This is my spot. Like, had a police escort for him waiting when they got here, and everything. So it was just an easy transition. So I flew straight to Bali, and we had 15 days total. We had a week here, and then 7 days in Perth. So I was actually working with the Performance Institute in Las Vegas, the UFC Performance Institute. My guy Charles over there was kind of handling Yair's nutrition prior. Yair had a chef in Mexico that he was working with that he'd send all the portion sizes and directions to, and then his chef would facilitate that, and he had some visa issues or something, so he couldn't come. So
you got to kind of hand it off to you pretty well, though.
Yeah, last minute sub. But he's 30 years old now, so he's jacked. Like, I don't know if you saw how big he was in the fight, but he's a big boy. He's the biggest
not a small
he's ever been.
145er.
He's not a small 145er at all. And so we did have a lot of work to do when he got here to Bali, and then we had a lot of work to do in fight week to get him to the scale and be on point, because I mean, you have to be 145 on the dot.
On
or
the
less.
yeah.
They don't give you a pound allowance for title fights, and that pound.
No, they
sometimes
screwed Charles Oliveira out of his title.
Exactly. So like you don't want to be messing with
Yeah.
scales. Like I check. That's my nightmare. I check the scale, our scale, probably 5 times a day because I'm
Yeah, make
like
sure it's
I
calibrated.
shifted it. I could have I could have decalibrated it just with me moving it. Like it was in my
Yeah.
backpack for an hour. I got to go check it again. Obviously, it didn't change too much, but isn't for my for my sanity. And my anxiety levels being low, I try to just check it all the time.
Hmm.
So yeah, we finished camp in Bali, which was awesome because it's hot here. Same time as Perth, so we acclimated pretty well.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so it was definitely wasn't easy. Uh,
What were you cooking for him mostly?
um, it would depend. I mean, I was making him some like healthy tacos and stuff like that. He was pretty heavy when he got here, so we did have to pull back on a few things just because all that travel. I mean, he had like 40
Yeah.
something hours to travel from Mexico. So he did take a couple days for him to kind of flush out all that travel,
Hmm.
fluid just from sitting and just not moving around much.
Hmm.
So it was one of those things where it's like he got here and we had a lot of work to do, and yeah, it was that was a mad dash to weigh-in day, and then it just all came super quick.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where like I hadn't met the guy. I watched the guy fight before, but I'd
Hmm.
never met the guy until showed up here in Bali, and then we're like, all right, let's go try to win this world title together. And
Thankfully, speaks English pretty well too.
yeah, and I actually speak Spanish, so
Yeah.
I do. We did pretty well, and yeah, he's a cool dude. Like I said, I didn't know the guy before, so and I
Yeah.
didn't know Jamal before I went out to Grand Rapids. I literally pulled up to his house, never met him, never talked to him,
Yeah.
and the next thing I know, I'm like sleeping at his house and cooking for him. So it's the one thing that I do feel like helped me growing up, that helps me now, was being the
Yeah.
new kid. Showing up at
Yeah.
all these new schools and like
Makes
having to
sense.
like, start. It really helped me transition to like just randomly showing up at someone's house and being
With
comfortable
social
being like,
skills and everything.
yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
at least in that aspect. And now
Yeah.
in all other aspects, I'm just weird socially. So
Well, I'm not too far
I could
different
pull it
either.
together. I could pull it together with fighters, but outside of
Yeah.
that, I'm a hermit.
I'm a bit of an introvert myself. So I think this is a perfect chance to weave in, speaking about Yair making weight, is the idea of weight cutting. So briefly, for those who aren't familiar, what is weight cutting? And what does that process look like for Yair, or just, a lot of fighters you work with in general?
Okay, yeah. So weight cutting as opposed to weight loss. So weight loss, obviously, some may know, some may not know. Let's say the fight camp is about weight loss. So he's
Hmm.
losing body fat. He's losing actual mass during
Yeah.
during fight camp, and then essentially weight cutting is dehydration and like losing fluids. So we
Hmm.
get to fight week. That's technically like weight cutting because we are
The
manipulating his
work's kind
fluid
of done there.
intake,
Yeah.
fiber intake,
Hmm.
carbohydrate intake, which is going to affect his glycogen. So we are essentially dehydrating him, and that is what weight cutting is essentially.
Hmm.
So start Tuesday, we pull sodium, we pull some fiber, pull carbohydrates, and then you water load. So basically, you're
Hmm.
drinking X amount of water based off how much weight you had to lose, and that helps flush out the excess sodium, and all that stuff. But the biggest thing is it's basically a non-sustainable way of losing weight. So it's
Yeah.
just you're basically being a shell of yourself, which in my term, and if I could do it and ban weight cutting, I would if there was a better way to handle it.
Yeah.
But guys are going to find ways around it. Whether you're doing hydration testing, whatever you're doing,
Yeah. I was
people are
gonna
going
say
to find a way
one
to cheat the
system doesn't
system.
seem to work that
It's
well.
garbage. One system is absolute garbage, and they act like it's the saving grace. It's
They act
trash.
about a lot of things. Yeah.
Man, they're tripping. They don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
but they'll act like they're the gold standard for safety. But
Yeah.
that's just, I guess that's just the world we live in. Shout out to
Hmm.
what championship.
Yeah.
But
They're actually
but
coming to the States. They're
they're
coming
coming to
just like
Colorado,
2 hours
right?
from me. Yeah, in Broomfield. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
2 hours north of me. Yeah.
yeah. Let me know if you want to go. I could probably. I,
If
I, I
you're
had con-
going
I had connections at one championship before I started talking about their
before you just
their
badmouth
their
them there.
hydrating. Yeah.
Well,
I
if
take
you do
everything
show
back.
up, dude, if you do show up, let's do it. Cause I think DJ is fighting whatchamacallit, for Mariah for they're like three-peat.
Are they actually selling tickets to it? Or are they just
I don't think.
acting like they're going to the U.S. market and not
Um,
selling tickets?
well, I don't want to take up too much of the time ranting on this. I think they are
Yeah,
selling
I'm
tickets.
just
It's
kidding.
on the schedule.
Oh yeah, hopefully they are.
They're a
Hopefully they
funny
are.
organization. But anyway, back to weight cutting. So like you mentioned, you're basically getting into like a shell of yourself for this brief period to step on the scale, hit the weight, and then rehydrate and get back to actually feeling, to your optimum self. So after they hit that weight, what is that? Well, I guess let me give you a two-part question. First off, what are some of the techniques? I guess you may or may not handle most of this, but what are the techniques that you at least like to see as far as, is it more sauna? Is it more like a hot bath? Is it more, that like sauna box that people will like zip themselves in?
Yeah.
Like what are your preferred methods of cutting that as safely as possible? And then more so, how do you go about hydrating them as best as possible? And I like that you mentioned coconut extract or coconut water because that's a huge ingredient that I use a lot, whether I'm doing ultras or things like that.
So to touch on the first question, the method of cutting weight. It depends on the athlete,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually handle all that. So that's my most stressful day, is because I'm in there with them doing that
Mm-hmm.
process. So it really depends on the guys. Some guys like baths, some guys hate baths. It's like, let's say we do a bath. I'm monitoring the temperature, moder-
Mm-hmm.
and time, and basically I'm tracking their sweat, how much they're sweating, tracking all that. So I have all
Mm-hmm.
that, like all that on paper. I'll start a lap timer, so I kind of have an idea how much they're sweating, how consistently they're sweating.
Yeah.
um, and so that's in the bath. And then in the sauna, it's a little bit more difficult, but track the temperature. It's just hard to
Yeah.
adjust the temperature in a sauna. Obviously, like if it's a dry sauna, like you really have no control over the temperature. The
Mm-hmm.
temperature is kind of just a temperature. And then, like, let's say we're doing sauna, keep guys in there for an X amount of time before they start sweating, kind of track their sweat, see how they're doing, get them out, and then we'll usually do a wrap or like a mummy or a burrito.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that essentially is us wrapping them in towels, still keeping the sweat going, but getting them out of the high heat. So obviously,
Yeah.
their cortisol raises when they're in the sauna.
Mm-hmm.
It's high temperature, it's highly stressful. So when we get them out of there to a lower temperature, the sweat stays somewhat consistent, but they're
Mm-hmm.
out of that environment. So they're wrapped up
Yeah.
in towels, put a little ice on their neck, still track their sweat, and then do that process. I mean, and then some smaller guys, like the fast twitch guys, I like to call them,
Mm-hmm.
they usually like to work that weight off. So do pads,
Yeah. I've
you
seen some
know,
fighters do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I like to think of it guys that are just smaller, just have that like that fast twitch, and they like to move. They're kind of just like,
Mm-hmm.
they're guys that
Jittery.
like jittery, like they just like to be able to move. So the last thing they
Mm-hmm.
want to do is just wrap up in some towels and sit there.
Yeah.
And Sergio Pettis is one of those guys. Like he could be in a sauna for 20 minutes and lose 2 pounds, or
Mm-hmm.
he could do like a slow pace on a treadmill and lose 2.5 pounds.
Mm-hmm. And
And
that'll be
and
more
do the same
enjoyable.
do the same amount of time. And he's
Yeah.
not breathing in hot air. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's one of those things. It's a preference, depending on what that fighter does. So I don't try to
Yeah.
change that. You know,
Okay.
I'll give guys tips. I'm like, hey, I think this will work better based off
Yeah.
your sweat rate. But like a guy like Yair, he was like, dude, I'll just do. And a guy like Jamahal, who doesn't really cut too much weight in terms of water.
Mm-hmm.
Like he worked his weight off and he lost 3.5 pounds in that session.
Mm-hmm.
Did a little pad work, some grappling, woke up on weight. So that's an easy one. Those are the ones I want to be part of.
Yeah.
Because my morning isn't riddled with anxiety and stress,
Yeah.
of having to get someone in a sauna, get someone in a bath. It's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's just highly stressful. I tell people I'd rather be them than be me, because
Yeah.
I'm facilitating the whole process of it, and it's stressful. But I guess, yeah, at the end of the day, it just comes down to a preference of the athlete. But with the
And then
Yair,
when it
same
comes to
thing.
rehydrating, not to cut you off, when it comes to
Oh, you're
rehydrating, how
good.
do you go about that process?
So, rehydrating, obviously, replenishing like sodium, electrolytes. I mean, whether it's in the
Yeah.
form of coconut water, or like some Noon tablets, something like that. Everything in the UFC has to be third party tested. So if I
Okay.
am using like
That makes sense. Yeah.
I use like the SIS, SIS
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen
electrolytes.
that brand. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Those ones are third party tested, and then getting like a carbohydrate, um, like a like I'll use GM1 Sport just because that one's
Yeah.
third party tested as well. Shout out to BPN, um, and um, and then it just is based off the weight cut. Honestly, I have
Yeah.
like a whole algorithm that's just how much they came in at fight week at, what they weighed in at. So I have a general idea of how much sodium, potassium, and electrolytes they lost throughout the week,
Okay.
and then
So you got it down to science.
replenishing them with that, and
Yeah.
then obviously putting that back in, and then refueling them is a whole different thing. But yeah, the base of it is they're losing a bunch of electrolytes through sweat.
Yeah.
They're losing potassium as well through that, and then they're glycogen depleted just because we've cut their carbs, and they've been training pretty much. Not all the time we cut their carbs, but I mean most of the time guys are cutting weight. You're going to be cutting back on carbs just because the weight of that glycogen in their muscles. So refueling them with that.
I was gonna say, so more of a fan question. What do you think about these just guys who are massive for the division, like a Alex Pereira or Chimaev, right?
I
Who's
love
just
it,
a
bro.
monster for 170. I do too.
I mean,
I just wonder, do you think Chimaev can continue to make 170 or what?
I think he has to restructure whatever he does and have a plan. He's the type of guy that I mean, I don't know. I know a few, details about kind of what happened that week, but more so, he's just a guy that goes into it and just like there's just chaos. It's just the way he fights is kind of the way he approaches a lot of things.
Yeah, he's a wild dude.
So it would take a lot of time for him to structure that weight cut properly and that weight descent properly. But at the end of the day, he could be world champion at 85 as well. So like I like to see these guys have longevity in the sport, and I would not want to see them killing themselves and doing permanent damage just to make this weight where you could be a champion at 85 and be fully fueled. And it's one of those things that I'd like to see these massive weight cuts go away, and I mean guys can still be big and strong, but not be not be putting their lives at risk, to make this weight. And people don't see the long-term effects of a lot of these fights. You turn your TV off. You don't see this man or woman go home to their family beat up and have long-term concussion symptoms. And let's say you are cutting a tremendous amount of weight, you're more susceptible to concussions. And you're susceptible to concussions anyways because you're going out there getting punched in the head. But like if you're going out there dehydrated,
it's even worse.
And at a disadvantage, you're at risk for more damage. And this is a sport of damage. And at the end of the day, I care about a lot of the guys I work with, so I want to put myself in the best position to put them, in a position to not be at risk. It's a dangerous sport, and you're doing something very dangerous before going out there and getting in a fist fight. So as much as I like to see these giants and like these scary like boogeyman guys in the division, I also like to see these guys kind of get starched and lose too, because like, it doesn't mean you're a better fighter if you're bigger.
Yeah.
Seeing these small guys come in and do well, just like Volkanovski this weekend.
Yeah.
It goes to show you don't have to cut weight to be the best in the world. And regardless of who you think won, it's up for debate. That fifth round, Islam was, he was drowning. And that's a guy that's much, much bigger and on paper should have finished the fight. But he didn't. And, Volkanovski could have gone 5 more rounds.
Yeah, dude.
And I think that's a true test of a pound for pound.
Yeah,
that's a true test for a pound for pound. Don't change that list. He didn't
well,
like,
they did,
he didn't really show much.
Yeah.
He won the fight on paper, but at the end of the day, like, pound for pound, like if there was no clock and those guys were going, Islam's in trouble. Islam is in big trouble.
Well, while I got you on that, while we're talking about pound for pound, I want to segue and get your take on so Jon Jones. We're like 2 weeks away, man.
That's crazy. He's coming back.
What are your expectations for him, man? Because I'll give you a little bit of my thoughts. Is 3 years off, a little bit worried about like the ring rust concept of it, and he wasn't showing out as much as he had in previous fights as he kind of tailed off with light heavyweight. But 3 years off, worked up his body. I'm guessing he's probably going to be in like the low 250s or upper 240s, what I'm guessing. Although I know he wanted to be like 265. And my other thing too is he's done it slowly. He's worked with I forgot what the lifting guy's name is. His like nickname is like the Rhino, Steve Efforting. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Efforting.
Yeah.
But worked with him, done all this strength training. Obviously, he's a freak athlete. His reach is absolutely absurd. He's, in my opinion, the GOAT, and many people's opinion, the GOAT. What are your thoughts on that fight coming up? Because Gon's a hell of a test, but to me, like a little less frightening than him fighting Ngannou, who has nuclear bombs in both hands.
So, I mean, Jon has that wild card in him. He is just a wild man. So, as far as ring rust goes, I don't think that's going to be a factor just because that dude, he's crazy. He's not going to be, shell-shocked by, going up a division and fighting, fighting for the title.
He used to spar with heavyweights all the time, right?
All the time, bro. He used to, bro, I know he used to just smoke heavyweights in the gym. And that's rolling off a bender. Jon is the type of athlete that has that it factor in him. Obviously, naturally talented, and just has a freak body type. Those long arms.
The whole family is
cardio.
Top
the
athletes.
Whole family. I mean, they're all multimillionaires. Just great genetics. Great genetics, and obviously he's a hard worker too. But more so, just great genetics. And I think the fight's gonna go. I mean, if you look at the way Ngannou controlled that fight just with his wrestling, obviously just off sheer strength, having that advantage is big. But if there's really good wrestlers, and I've talked to good wrestlers about this, just because the guy is strong doesn't mean he's going to out-wrestle you. If you know how to wrestle, just having a guy that can out-wrestle you just because he's strong is a big red flag. Because he that's how he won the fight, right? And that was on one knee. And Ngannou's knee was destroyed.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're saying, because my question was, is Jones as strong as Ngannou? And to your point, I don't think he is. But again, to your point, I think Ngannou was able to leverage the wrestling purely just like muscling him through the air with those massive takedowns, right? On one leg, exactly. That knee was
factor in athleticism and superior wrestling and like legitimate wrestling. I think it's gonna be a long night. I think he takes him down. I think he hurts him with elbows, and I think he submits him pretty quickly. I think it happens before the fourth round. Yeah,
I'm definitely excited to see it. I Jon Jones was kind of like the one that like got me into like MMA a little bit, and
me too. I was a huge Jon Jones fan.
The sad truth of it is as soon as I started following, the first like fight I was following, I wasn't able to find any illegal streams at the time. But when he first fought DC, and and so I was like watching or like looking at the like live feed, people were talking about that, and of course after that he's like suspended, for cocaine. Yeah. Then he comes back, fights St. Preux, goes to fight DC again. I wake up the morning of the fight. It's canceled because he tested positive. And then, eventually they reschedule it. He fights DC, wins. I'm running, as much as I love DC, running around the room excited because I'm like, Jon won. And then he gets suspended again. And it's like, I never get to watch this guy that is like my favorite fighter. It's a roller coaster.
Being a Jon Jones fan is like being like an Eagles fan, You're getting your heart broken all the time. I was a huge Jon Jones fan. Like since when I was in high school, I remember when he beat Shogun. Yeah. And this is when he was like the good like Christian dude. He was like just beating people up and like praying or allegedly he said he was praying, but getting to see him coming at 23 years old and being like just this savage and this wild man. Yeah. Yeah, and then so I was a huge Jon Jones fan, and when he fought DC, I was still a Jon Jones fan. And then obviously when I met DC, I was like, you know what? Jon Jones sucks.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck Jon Jones.
Cheater.
And then Jon, and then I saw Jon in the elevator one time, and he knew who I was, and like he gave me this dirty look, and then I gave him a dirty look, and I was like,
damn, no fan no more.
No. And then I also felt robbed of like a lot of good fights because of Jon's decision making, So more so, you like to see greatness, I think in any form.
Yeah.
it's cool to see a guy that's leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jon Jones owes it to himself and owes it to the fans to, go out there and, do what he should have been doing the past 5 years,
Yeah.
and just being active,
Yeah.
showing
Stay
how,
clean.
how,
Stay out of trouble. I love Gon too. Yeah. I mean, he's a great
yeah,
guy and such a athletic just specimen. At heavyweight.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think John's going to do really good. But at the end of the day, it's a heavyweight fight, so anything can happen. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just want a good fight. I want John to be
Yeah.
able to go out there and put on a show, and hopefully all this work that he's been doing, getting up to heavyweight, pays off.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got a true test, and Gon's so athletic. Like I think that's the first person that's gonna match John's athleticism.
Yeah.
So it's crazy that it's 2 weeks away.
I know. I checked the calendar and I was like, oh shit! Like I kept thinking it was like 3 or 4 weeks, and I was like, man, we're close. We're close.
Yeah, no, they're really pushing a bunch of pay-per-views now because I mean, then a couple weeks after that,
March is too. Yeah.
Yeah.
London. Yeah.
It's Izzy. Oh yeah, London, and then right after that, it's Izzy and
Peloton
in Miami. So
yeah,
they're pushing out fights, and then obviously come June, July. Hopefully we get light heavyweight. I'm really hoping that Yair and Jamahal are not on the same card.
Oh, that'd be
like
stressful.
where they do like a international fight week, like Jamahal Hill versus Yuri, and then I doubt Volkanovski's gonna turn around and fight at featherweight. I think they're gonna do a rematch at lightweight.
I don't think they will. I think I think it depends if they schedule Oliveira and Dariush, they might try and pick the winner of that, but that's supposed to be in April or maybe even May, so that's going to be a bit. But I think they'll wait it out. Like I don't think they'll schedule the rematch. I think they do want to, and plus they don't want to have an interim champ just kind of sit on ice. They probably want to get Yair back in there. And to your point though, they might schedule it on the same card mainly because I don't think. Well, no, they did do Volk headlining against Chance on Jung, or yeah. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy timing. Yeah, the fact that they fought back to back like within a couple weeks, it's just like, with my luck, they're going to be on the same card.
Yeah. Just a lot of traveling and stress for you. Well, I appreciate connecting with you, and I definitely want to stay in touch and get pick your brain on a lot of these fighters or prospects because it's definitely interesting to see from a fan perspective. But where can people find you, and what do you have coming up? Any I know you ran that Bali Ultra. Do you have anything else you're training for? Do you have time for that these days?
So I'm training for that again. I'm doing that again. I'd like to do it again in May, but I broke my foot during the first one, so I'm still kind of dealing with
on the mend
a bunch of stress fractures from that. I'd like to do it again in May, but just in terms of scheduling for the race, I mean for the fights, it's going to be tough just because I got to fly to the States in a couple weeks for a fight, and then Sergio Pettis is going to be fighting here soon, and then I got a couple guys that are just going to be fighting back to back to back. So it's looking maybe September for the Ultra. It comes back. It's again in September. So trying to manage that. And do that again. I gotta go sub 10. I was so mad at my time and everything with that. But as you know, with races and ultras, anything can happen. It's like a fight, but that's not a good enough excuse for me. I should have been in control of the uncontrollable, and I got to make things right with that. So
nothing ever goes.
The funny thing about that was my first marathon was on race day. So like I just had to. In my mind, I was like, I just got to do 2 marathons a day and then just get the first one out of the way, and that's my first marathon, and then I got a quick second one, and I'll be good.
Yeah, what's the problem with that?
It seems like a completely normal thing to do. I couldn't see.
So what's the Instagram? Where can people find you?
Yeah, Instagram is Chef Larios. I pretty much just have Instagram, to be honest. I haven't.
Is there any dot or anything? It's just exactly how it sounds?
Yeah, no, Chef Larios, yeah,
cool.
ChefLarios.
And it'll be linked in the show notes anyway, so all set.
Yep, sweet.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it, and people know where to find you. And again, if you found this interesting, please share the show, subscribe for more stuff like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.